works.
All right, hey folks, it is December the 7th, and today we're talking about two chapters. We're talking about chapters 90 and chapters 91. We are going to have a quiz on this Thursday over vocabulary terms. I'm going to post what chapters those terms will be over later. There's one vocabulary quiz set that I need to make because as it stands now, I don't have it. But I can make it, and it doesn't take that long. So I'm going to try to get that done during our third class period today. The terms we have for these two chapters are markets and fairs, prices, trade with the Orient, supply of money, usury, and Jews, as in like what happened to Jewish people during the Middle Ages. And it wasn't always cheery. All right. So first, I only got a few images for those who are in class today. So medieval coinage, we've talked about before in our prior chapters that any feudal lord could make his own coins. These are some of the king's coins in the 13th century England. And so you can see here it bears an image of the king, and it has a cross on the other side. They were often debased. So debasement is when you take coins and you shave some of it off to use as a smaller denomination. But also you might shave off the edges to try to hide the fact that the coin is worth less than it actually is, because you could then take these shavings and perhaps make new coins out of it. Sometimes kings would debase their own coins. Sometimes they would fill them in the center with a cheaper metal to try to lie about their worth. Sometimes you'd make them into an alloy. So instead of just having silver coins, it might be silver with a little zinc mixed in. So it's not pure anymore. So it's worthless.
Like gold with silver.
Yeah, gold with silver or iron or lead or something like that. And so because a coin simply meant it was worth this much in weight of gold and silver. It didn't really mean anything else. It was based on what we call specie. Specie is a precious metal. So they had a lot of coin problems with that. There was, your book's correct, not a lot of mining going on. People who had money were usually the wealthy, and they would use that money to buy luxury goods. And that's often a case a lot of times in human history. Whenever you have people who are very well off financially, if they don't have incentive to invest that money, they tend to just use the money for luxury goods and stuff like that, trying to live the good life, right? And so, bless you. And it's one of the reasons why feudalism was so attractive. You didn't have to pay people money; you just gave them food, let them work on some land. So, all right, so. Medieval markets and fairs, of course, we've talked a little bit about this in the past. So the fair was like a really big to-do. It could be anywhere from like a week to a couple of months. The fairs would attract circuses. They would attract people in the arts, such as people putting on plays and musicians. But they would also, the main point was to bring in people who, for a rare chance, could bring in goods from another part of the world to sell. And by doing so, they could trade with things they normally couldn't get throughout the year. People would flock to these things because they couldn't go shopping that often. And so they'd save up what money they could, and they would or whatever they could trade, like one-for-one goods, and come to these fairs. And sometimes they might leave their farm and just camp outside of the city or get an inn. So it brought a lot of commerce to cities. It was a big to-do. So you see it like it's like sort of roasting like a whole cow. All right, so Jewish people. Jewish people had really, really hard time throughout the Middle Ages. It always depended on who was the king at the time. Your book's correct to say that there were a lot of laws banning Jewish people from different trades, and things like that. Their religious worship was often restricted depending on where they were, their ability to farm and things like that. So especially in Eastern Europe, they faced wholesale slaughter. Sometimes, however, in Western Europe, they did as well. There was one case during the wars where William the Conqueror was taking over England, and a whole tower full of Jewish refugees burned to death. There's also cases where Ferdinand and Isabella, after the Reconquista, they threw out all non-Christian subjects out of their country. Part of it had to do with they didn't quite know who to trust. So, now, and another thing too is that Jewish people were ethnically different. Whenever we talk about, later on, we talk about the Spanish Inquisition, there's a major misconception about the Spanish Inquisition, that it targeted Jewish and Muslim people. In part, it did. But a lot of researchers and historians have come to the conclusion that a lot of it was actually racially motivated, because a lot of the people who were persecuted were actually from Morocco. That was the one thing that was in common, not necessarily religion, but the fact that they weren't Spaniards. And so they were the ones who were most likely to come up and face the Inquisition. We'll talk about that later. Book's correct to point out that King Edward I had many of them kicked out of England. There's going to be periods of persecution in France and stuff like that. A lot of that has to do with the fact that they're outsiders. They're people who were unable to integrate fully into the norms of society. Another fact was they were seen as greedy because they were the financial heads of most of Europe. So it's a big problem. Oh wait, that's later on. All right, so your book's correct to point out that Italy is going to be a major banking place for Europe, and it's going to be they're going to have so much money. They're going to fund the Renaissance. But we're going to talk about that more later when we actually get to the Renaissance chapters. So, and that's that. All right. So our terms: markets and fairs, prices, trade with the Orient, supply, usury, and Jewish people. So, I'll talk a little bit about it and all that stuff. And I'll call on some of you because you're so smart. You can help me out with it. All right. So, Logan, markets and fairs. What was that about? What do you do, Adam?
Markets, you buy stuff, and
Yeah.
you sell stuff, and then fairs, you watch entertainment.
Kind of. Markets were for buying and selling. Trade, you're right, year round. But it had a lot of restrictions, like to foreigners and stuff like that. And also, it's going to be restricted in prices, which we're going to find out in a minute. Restrictions. So these people had a marketplace economy, but it's not what we would call capitalism. You wouldn't call it capitalism, you wouldn't call it socialism, it was medieval. So, medievalism. All right, so, and fairs was more than entertainment. Fairs were yearly. Or annually, whatever you want to call it, were yearly. And outsiders invited. So they're like, hey, come on down. So it's like trade days once a year. Of course, Canton's changed a lot. When I was your age, you get to Canton, and a lot of the stuff was like a giant garage sale. And there's still some of that today, but most of that stuff, when I go to Canton, I'm like, all of it's made in China.
You talking about First Monday?
Yeah, First Monday. I was like, especially like you go to like the indoor areas. It's like everything. I'm like, think about that Walmart. It's like that's off Amazon. You know, so like, I don't know. A lot of it's manufactured stuff. It used to be more like used stuff. And, I kind of like it better then. All right, so Edwin, prices. So yeah, so what were prices like when you went to these things?
So they believe that you would pay for the just price.
Yeah, paid for the just price. What was that?
It's a price determined by what you pay for the materials and labor.
Yeah, the just price
Yeah.
was like
Don't know.
anti-profit.
Yeah.
You made this. Here you go. Here's a little bit of money, enough for you to buy some bread. Go away. Yeah, it was like just price set by law. And so why would you want to do anything? So what we see in the medieval economy, there's a lot of disincentives, lots of restrictions. The price on what you could sell things. Not everybody could come and sell. So it was like you had the guilds button people out. There's hardly any money in the supply. Yeah, based on labor, that's like your actions and supplies, the goods you use to make it. So yeah, it's like, why would anybody do that? You might as well just be a serf, really. Like, what's the point? So yeah, there's a lot of restrictions on the medieval economy. A lot of it was to protect your local interest. Really, in the long run, it only just hurt all of you. So, I mean, freedom, like we're going to see later on in the Renaissance, is going to be like really, really helpful to help like blow up the economy and learning and all that stuff. All right, so trade with the Orient. So, Andra. Yeah, no, they didn't trade that. I mean, some of it might have seemed like it. I mean, okay. So, oh, no.
Orient's just like foreign country.
Orient is Latin for where we get Latin for the East. Really, it just means the East.
What was it?
Orient Express.
I will look that up.
I believe that. So tell us about it. So, okay. What were they getting from India and China and places like that? Jordans, AirPods, dancing bears.
So, I guess, Phoenicians and families with silk, pepper, and spices and.
Yeah. So, could get spices. Yeah, peppers. That's just another spice. Yeah. Also, like, what was a really expensive kind of cloth that they would have? Silk. Yeah, the silk robe. Yeah, silk. Like gems and stuff. Great. So, this is stuff that we call luxury goods, stuff for the rich. And it was super expensive because it had to go through long routes, right? So, came from long, man, this marker's running out, dangerous routes. And so that would make the price, the danger made the price go up on these luxury goods. The distance, it would take years to get this stuff over here. And also on the way, they had to pay a bunch of tolls, or they might have to trade with other people. So that just like a lot of middlemen. So spices and stuff were super rich. It was only like for kings and queens to have cinnamon or black pepper or something like that, or nutmeg. So like commoners couldn't even smell it junk. It was like too rare. But we're going to see the Crusades are going to introduce commoners to it. And they're like, wow, food doesn't have to taste like rotten meat anymore. Which is kind of important. Okay. So, money supply. Kelvin, what was wrong with the money supply? Why was money so messed up in the Middle Ages? Who could make money? Why didn't merchants like using money if they were traveling merchants? What was inconvenient about it? Was it just one kind of money?
It was heavy.
One kind of coinage? Now, we talked about debasement. What's that?
That's when you like take shavings.
Yeah. So coins were often fooled with, let's say, to lower their value. And I think I heard someone say this. Lots of different kinds of coins. Man, I'm just spelling all over the place. And why were there different kinds of coins? Because anybody could make it.
You just get a bunch of metals,
Yeah.
mix together, put a stamp on it, and there.
Any lord or king could mint money. But they didn't trade their cash with one another. You could have two barons and their estates are right next to each other. But Baron A makes his own coins, Baron B makes his own coins, but they're not going to trade their coins with each other. I'm not going to accept Baron B's coins. Well, I'm not going to accept Baron A's coins. So what's the point in getting paid in money if you can't like trade with your neighbor? It was like just kind of like
It's inflation, basically.
well, they I think it was more like deflation because prices, because there was so little value in money that yeah, it would be inflation. Yeah, because prices would skyrocket. You would if they were going to accept money, they would accept a whole lot of it. But if money has no value, it's not even inflation or deflation. It's just now all of a sudden
Pieces of rock.
you're in a pay in kind. You might as well just trade junk. You might as well trade buffalo skins for arrowheads. You know, it's just straight trade. All right, so usury. Shelby. No, oh my God, usury. So,
I mean, I know where it's talked about.
what does it mean? What's usury mean? Banks do it all the time. Credit cards do it. It's when you pay
Lending money. I think.
interest. Yeah. And was it okay to do, or was it not okay to do?
Well, I hope it was okay. I mean,
Oh, we're not hoping. We're reading the book.
Not okay.
Most people would like.
Most people couldn't do it. Yeah. So.
And most people would abuse it. They would
Mhm.
tax too much.
Yeah, loans for interest. And interest is when you pay extra money for getting a loan. Interest was banned in most of Europe. So what that means, you couldn't get a loan to start a business because nobody was loaning money, which is another thing and why their economy was always stinking and stagnant and they're not going anywhere. Like today, one of the reasons why people can't start businesses because you could take a risk. How do you take the risk? You got to get a loan to take that risk. And taking a loan is part of that risk. Couldn't do that. Couldn't buy something nice and pay it off over time. You couldn't do that. If you did have like a little business, you would have to save and save and save, and you're probably going to die before you'd be able to spend the money. So it was terrible. It was terrible. So the whole point was to try to prevent greed. That didn't really work. That's a part of human nature. So just because you ban something doesn't make it go away. All right. So Jewish people. So who wants to do that? I'll let you pick. All right, go ahead.
So because the Christians couldn't do loans, it was left to the Jews.
Ah, yes.
And because of that, they weren't really welcomed, pretty much. Like,
Yes.
they're like,
So people were jealous, right?
yes.
Many were jealous of their wealth.
And there was like, the law that went around, you couldn't give the Jews any protection.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were, persecuted. And Edward I drove them from England,
Mm-hmm.
and Ferdinand and Isabella were like, you can't live in Spain anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Like no legal protection.
Called the Alpine.
And even today, where like a lot of people consider Europe a post-Christian nation, it had anything to do with that. There's still a lot of anti-Semitism. So even it's just something. Just I don't know. Even though most Jewish people, you can't really tell them that they're any different from like another European over there. So it's just like it's the strangest thing. No legal protections. Kicked out of much of Europe. Yeah. I mean, Europe's not a nation; it's a collection of nations. Not that. All right, so yeah. So keep this in mind as we start moving through, because finances is one of the things that helped explain the Renaissance and the Reformation and the Enlightenment. This change in economy is going to be hand in hand with the change of individual freedom. If you don't have economic freedom, you don't have personal freedom. And we're going to go from a period of restricted economic and personal liberty to where it's all going to grow. I didn't mean everything's like all like butterflies and rose petals, but I mean, it's going to be an improvement. All right, kids, it's going to end our lecture for today. I will post what our quiz is going to be out later or over later. All right, so.